We are broadcasting, as you know, from Netroots Nation 2016 here in St. Louis, Missouri. And the reason why this site was chosen for this progressive convention here in St. Louis this year was to honor and commemorate the uprising in Ferguson and, of course, the memory of Mike Brown, who died in Ferguson. So joining us now to talk about Ferguson and St. Louis and the deeper implications of what has transpired and continues to transpire here is Jamala Rogers. Jamala is the author of the book Ferguson is America, Roots of Rebellion. She is a community organizer. She has lived in the St. Louis area for many, many years, has deep roots here, although you're originally from Kansas City, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, first of all, Jamala, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's our privilege. Now, let's start with this. If you could give people who are interested and sympathetic, including the people who have come here for this conference, one message, one takeaway that they should have, one thing they should know about Ferguson and St. Louis and what's going on here now, what would it be?
What's going on here now?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I could do a short answer to that, but I think what's going on here now is still a healing process from what happened in terms of the rebellion, and also a methodic but strategic look at the way that we're going to tackle some of these systems of oppression. So that's what's happening now, the short story.
So what we had here was, you and I were talking a little bit before we went on air about, we were saying, when people say, why Ferguson? Why did this happen in Ferguson? We might as well ask ourselves, why hasn't it happened? Hasn't it happened in all those other communities around the country where an innocent young person has been shot by police or where other things have happened? So what do you think caused all the forces to come together to cause the uprising, which I call an uprising, I don't know if you have a different term for it, in Ferguson? What should people know or understand about what caused people to say enough is enough here in Ferguson when Mike Brown died?
Well, the way that I describe it, it is like 1,000 cuts a day for an African-American person in the St. Louis region, and I don't think it's any different from other urban areas. So you have this accumulation of injustices from multiple systems of oppression. So in Ferguson in particular, you had a court system that was connected to the police department, which did its racial profiling and the giving of citations so that, there was revenue generated for the city. You had, housing where folks were forced to particular parts of Ferguson. And you had school districts that, some of which were okay and some of them weren't. In fact, we know that the school district that Mike Brown graduated from was unaccredited. The Normandy School District, and the school districts that are unaccredited in the St. Louis metro area all happen to be African American. So you got failing school systems, you have discrimination in housing, you have a court system that is predatory in nature, and then you have occupation by a police department whose main purpose is harassing, containing, and then making money off of you. And so those perfect storm came together on August 9th, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that you had a young black unarmed youth laying in the streets of Ferguson in 90-plus weather on a afternoon broad daylight that people were able to gather, take pictures of, and send around the world. So that, I think, was the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people. And St. Louis has not been one that had a rebellion. Even in the 60s, when 100-plus cities went up in smoke after the assassination of Dr. King, St. Louis did not. So most people here thought, we are just used to being heaped on. But that day, folks said enough is enough.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, and I got a better sense of it being here in the St. Louis area. A lot of people don't realize the way this area is divided up. You got the city of St. Louis, but then you've got all these different, you got Ferguson and all these different towns here, and each of them has their own government. And you have one like Ferguson, for example, where the population is very heavily African American, but the elected government was very heavily white, and so it was not a representative government. And the police force had a very heavy white population. And then you have the fact that each of these little governments is making its money off of basically extracting it through the police force, as you alluded to, for the amount of money that comes out. It's like a regressive taxation on poorer people, where you stop people for riding a bicycle, you stop people for doing this, you stop people for doing that, get all this hundreds and hundreds of dollars out of them at a shot, and then that just creates this, doesn't that just create this built-in conflict where the police are seen as this oppressive force there to take money on behalf of a non-representative government?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I point out in the book, because what happened in Ferguson, if people know the history of their own cities, they know that most of this is not something new, that if you look at the systems of oppression in all these cities, it's been replicated all over. So what's different about St. Louis is that you talked about those 90 municipalities. In the book, I point out that the reason that we have 90 is because as people started to leave, white people started to leave St. Louis, they created these little enclaves that became municipalities. And at a certain point, those were not self-sustaining. So even though they didn't want black people there, they felt like if they were going to be there, they might as well exploit them. And so a number of Fergusons popped up. And so Ferguson at one point was basically all white, and they wanted to keep it that way. And so the trickle of black folks that started to come in, I say, you're going to come in, but it's going to be at a price. I mean, that literally, it was what happened. And so I know people were horrified to see that you had a nearly 70% black population with an all-white city council, a predominantly white school board, a predominantly white police force. And so this is part of the challenges of people trying to be a part of a democracy where they were, and it just wasn't happening. Every chance that they got, the powers to be really stopped them, suppressed it, or just punished them. And so people even beyond Ferguson who had to go through Ferguson felt the same way that people who actually live there, because if you get stopped, you're going to get the same thing that a citizen of Ferguson got. So that's why when people say these are outsiders, we said that's BS, because all of us, 90 municipalities, you go 5 miles, you're going to hit 5 municipalities.
Right.
So we are part of a metro area where we all have been victimized by these municipalities. And so everybody was angry, and that's why you had masses of people showing up on West Florissant.
And then it gets to the question of why would a police officer even have bothered with Mike Brown? Let's say that he was walking in the street, right, or whatever and we know their story has changed quite a bit over what they say happened, but could it have been just that they wanted to write him a ticket and make a little bit more money for the? Oh,
that's exactly what it was, because at the time that the officer stopped Mike Brown, he didn't even know about the alleged robbery. Right. He was getting ready to stop him for jaywalking, walking in the middle of the street. And so what I'm saying is, like, every opportunity the police have to stop somebody and rack up citations, that's what they were instructed to do. And we actually have heard this from other municipalities where the police chief or police officers disclose, that's what I've been told, that I need to racially profile black people, harass them, keep them from coming in this municipality, and if they do, here are the consequences. And so some of it is making money, but the also other thing is like setting up a deterrent, because for at least the 40-something years I've been here, there are certain municipalities that black people circumvent, because you already know what's getting ready to happen to you. If you try to go through there, you're going to get ticketed for little or no reason. So it actually is a denial of people's human rights in terms of being able to move freely in an area that's supposed to be a democracy. So
yeah, I have to just interrupt to say, and we're talking with Jamala Rogers, who's the author of Ferguson is America, Roots of Rebellion. I have to say, I've been to South Africa a number of times. In a way, it reminds me of South Africa in the apartheid days, when you used to need a travel permit if you were a person of color, in order to go from one town to another. And
it's been likened to that as well, because
has it?
Yes, indeed, because when you're there, you have to show ID. So what is that about?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Let me see your ID. Where are you going? I mean, it's not unlike Palestine. We talked about that
Right,
too.
right.
How is it that immediately the young people in Palestine felt a connection with the young people on West Florissant, and even in terms of sharing, how do you build your own gas mask and what are the antidotes for tear gas? All that was shared, and they felt an immediate connection. So the world around us is seeing and feeling particular things, and I think now, even looking at some of the stuff that's happened in Europe, some of the young people in Ferguson now have an affinity to that because they understand the kind of oppressive systems that would cause people to get out into the streets. So
Right. I remember seeing the graffiti in Palestine where they wrote Fergestein. You remember that?
Right.
And now you're saying that the people here feel an affinity to what's going on in Europe. Does this give you hope?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I see so many opportunities for organizing that has opened up since the Ferguson uprising. And, we're trying to take advantage of that. I mean, there's lots of young people who now want to make this their life commitment to organize people for power, and that's what we're going to need. We're going to need the next generation to step up, to be trained, and to understand how these systems work, and to understand what strategy is, to understand the difference between a protest and an action, and that sounds sexy, but is that going to get you where ultimately you need? And so all of those kind of discussions we've been having since Ferguson, and I think they've been very healthy. I really am looking forward for a new day. Now, what we have seen, and sadly to say, is much resistance from the powers that be who said even that they were open or would do these changes in policy. But again, that is the kind of takeaways that people need to know, that this is not going to be easy. So the legislative session right after Mike Brown's murder, there were 40 different pieces of legislation that had been proposed around court reform.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many of those passed?
I don't want to guess.
One.
All right.
One passed, and it was weakened, and 3 months ago a judge overturned that. So that's the kind of stuff could be disappointing if you don't understand the way the systems works. But what it means that we need to step up our game, we need to get more organized, and we need to build a movement that preempts that kind of thinking, that folks can get away with that.
And I would also, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, but I would also encourage people to go down to their local court system, because chances are, just take a look, just sit there for a day, and chances are what they're going to see is a lot of wealth extraction, for lack of a better term, that really the courts are being used as money extracting machines on the people who can least afford it, because they're politically least likely to cause trouble for the people who are taking the money. Is that a fair statement?
No, that's a fair statement, but the other piece of it that I would add, and this is what I challenge white people, when you see a court and you see predominantly black people sometimes wrapped around the corner, is your immediate thought, oh, look at all the criminals or the people that are breaking the law? Or are you saying, what's wrong with this picture? Are these people being targeted? And I think by and large, a lot of white people say, oh, these people are not following the law. And so there has to be a radical transformation in terms of the way white people are thinking in this country about criminalizing black folks. No matter what class black folks are in, we all get criminalized. And so even that observation has white people rethinking the way that they look at black folks, because many of them have admitted, yeah, when I did see that, I thought, oh, look at all the black people who violated the law, as opposed to saying, these people, something is wrong with this picture. How is it that sometimes there's literally no white people in the courtroom, except for the judge.
Right, and maybe the police officer.
Right.
So, all right, well, we're going to have to leave it there, but these are great points, and I very much look forward to reading this book, Ferguson is America, Roots of Rebellion. So, Jamala Rogers, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Richard.